Hey, I'm your host, Mike Gelb, and this is the Consumer VC podcast, where we discuss the intersection of venture capital and consumer innovation. If you're enjoying the show, also subscribe to my newsletter at theconsumervc.com, where you'll receive all new episodes straight to your inbox and a weekly recap of all the consumer deals happening. All content and episodes are for informational and entertainment purposes only and is non-investment advice. Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about aventure, a new platform that's about to launch that's making venture capital available to the masses. It doesn't matter if you're accredited or non-accredited. Aventure provides an opportunity to diversify your investment portfolio and invest in private funds. If you're a fund manager, the aventure app also provides everything you need in order to make startup investments, including extensive research materials, seamless transaction processes, and allocation measures so you can properly diversify your portfolio. Now, typically, venture capital and startup investments are liquid, which is a major pain point for our industry. Aventure is fixing this by offering periodic withdrawals for its investors. I and many others in this industry are so excited about this launch. They are preparing to list their first fund in the beginning of next year. So if you want to be the first to know, join their waitlist at aventure.vc. Our guest today is Adam Ross, founder and CEO of Heyday. Heyday is a skincare establishment that is overhauling the facial experience. We discuss how he got interested in skincare, why he only wanted to focus on facials, how he thought about expanding footprint with a combination of corporate and franchise-owned stores. This was such an interesting conversation about how to grow retail stores, as well as how to focus on one thing. Without further ado, here's Adam. Adam, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Mike, I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks so much for coming on the show. This is gonna be a lot of fun. So, want to start from your beginning of your career. What attracted you to first banking, and why did you end up leaving banking?
Ooh, starting off strong. Banking for me was it was a fantastic. It's a real project-based way to work. So for me, any advisory assignment you do, and I worked specifically in mergers and acquisitions, whether you're buying companies, whether you're advising selling companies, divisions, it's very much sort of project-based and, all came with it sort of like unique attributes and opportunities. So I think just sort of viewed that as a incredible opportunity to get the exposure to different categories and industries. And I think in doing that, you actually get a pretty broad, solid appreciation for what businesses go through at the strategic, operational, and financial level. And for me personally, got to an inflection point maybe a dozen years in where it's like I can be a lifer and be a managing partner and do that for the rest of my life, or I can use this as a stepping stone to sort of be on the other side of the table. And I think for me, I was increasingly attracted to the smaller deals where you're working with the founder, the entrepreneur, like these folks that have started businesses and built brands that sort of like delighted and engaged customers. And for me, it was just a personal decision of I want to roll up my sleeves and sit on that side of the table and build brands and businesses and just use that knowledge from banking to do so.
Were you always interested in the retail side and consumer brands those types of businesses, or and I guess how did you make decisions that you wanted to actually focus in this area?
Yeah, great question. I did a year and a half in Australia, which was I was very much a generalist. So I had exposure to to mining, to healthcare, to telecommunications, and consumer and retail. When I transferred Mike to New York, a lot of the investment banks are structured in pods where you need to be very sector specific. So I think just given some of the experience that I'd had in Sydney, I was sort of deemed appropriate for the consumer and retail group in New York. So that's been my pigeonhole ever since.
Cool. So what led you to rethink or think about skincare and led you down to actually creating Heyday?
I think one of the categories that I actually ended up spending a lot of time in my latter banking years was actually in the beauty sector. So I was doing a lot of work for Revlon, for Avon, for P&G and Gillette, more specifically, and working with them, Mike, you could see there's a really high degree of focus on pushing products rather than helping consumers do what was right for their skin. And I think sort of at the same time, for me personally, looking after my skin was increasingly difficult and confusing. So, when I was then, speaking with, with friends of mine, everyone seemed to be equally frustrated with how difficult it actually was to look after their own skin. So I became convinced there had to be a better way. And then I think as I sort of peeled back the onion a little bit, just sort of it came to the fact that like access to professional skincare services and knowing how to look after your own skin with the right products, it should be available to everybody, but it's not. Certainly given the cumulative benefits of great skincare. So, it just basically came down to the fact that, consumers want and need a much better option than what currently existed. So, at Heyday, we're setting out to change that.
Why did you, I guess, digging into that a little bit more, why did you want to focus on the professional services side when it came to skincare, as opposed to starting off by launching your own products, your own skincare products?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think a lot of what we do at Heyday, it's decisions are actually anchored around where do we want to do what's more common in the industry and just do it better, or where do we actually want to come at it from a very different angle. And I think at the time there were obviously a high number, Mike, of D2C, skincare brands, but it seems to be one where like access to product wasn't actually an issue in the category, and I think every business needs to start with sort of solving a consumer problem, a consumer need. And for us, like the angle to actually come in was the service side of the business, because the facial is like the gold standard of skincare, and you've got in this employment class of estheticians, this incredible knowledge, and they've done this, they've done, like in New York, for example, Los Angeles, they've done this 600-hour state certified course. So their knowledge on how to give a correct facial, how to use professional strength products, they can actually sort of create a efficacious treatment in a way that very few D2C brands can actually do. So, we actually came at it, and at the time was actually sort of the antithesis to a lot of business models that were very sort of D2C focused, and that was the way that they were going to grow and expand. We said actually we want to take a more challenging channel in physical retail, and we want to create an experience. We want to do it in an unintimidating manner. We want to do it with the right, furniture, design, decor, and whatnot. So we can attract people that feel comfortable talking about skincare and use that moment with estheticians to actually educate and inform, so people can leave a Heyday looking great with the right, with the right treatment, but then armed with the right products and how to look after themselves. So there's a big educational component that goes into, what we view as a holistic skincare experience. The esthetician touches your skin once a month. You're then touching it twice a day for the other 29 days until you come back to a Heyday again. So, our goal is to have you leaving our doors armed with knowledge, and, with skincare, more isn't better. Fewer things done well is what's ultimately going to deliver the right results.
And that was, I mean, because it is quite different in that, as you mentioned, it was kind of the height of the D2C movement, and online, and the what we believed maybe Facebook had, unlimited uh, inventory when it comes to advertising. And so this was quite differentiated in that you actually went, okay, let's actually go to retail, and because you were so focused, it seems, on that kind of consumer education piece, and rather than doing it, maybe on a um, online marketing type way, actually doing it in person and actually talking to professionals to actually show people what the actual right routine is, should be for their facials, or their skincare routine in general. And then, of course, create a store. So what was the first store you opened, and how did you think about location, and all the kind of things that kind of go into creating a retail store?
Yeah, no, a great question. We actually opened our first door in Nomad, in New York, and at the time it was very central location, Mike. Good combination of like residential, commercial traffic. There was some other sort of like self care and wellness brands around. So I think in some cases when you're looking to build a physical store, you just want to focus on like where are the dollars in the category or adjacent category getting spent. So that one for us, I think, felt really good in terms of this is going to I think help us prove out who our primary consumer actually is and how does she want to be using us. So yeah, we opened in summer of 2015, and within 12 months, the store was up sort of like north of 100%. We had this sort of like really healthy percentage of clients that were coming once a month. And, one of the things that I was probably a little unclear on before we opened was just how much work would we need to do to convince customers of the cumulative benefits of skincare in terms of getting into the right routine with us. And we've actually found that actually hasn't the case. I think the market structure has just been pretty structurally flawed, that, people have always, I think, wanted to engage with professional skincare services. It's just been narrowed onto either like the higher end spas that cost a lot of time and take a lot of, cost a lot of money or take a lot of time, or it's sort of been cheap services that have been a little inconsistent in their product. So this was, I think, a bit of a case of like, if you build it, they will come. And we sort of found that we wanted to hit a spot in the market. I think just to round it out with your question on the experience, I think at the time, and you're going back, there were so many brands that had started to do one thing and do it really well. So in New York, we'd seen SoulCycle do a fantastic job, freeing cycling from the gym. Dry Bar was freeing the blowout from the salon, and at Heyday, we're talking then about freeing the facial from the spa. And I think it's a nuance, but it's a really important one, because when you hear the word spa, sort of in air quotes, it's got this beauty, pampering, and indulgent connotation that comes with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think when you take the facial the way we have at Heyday and you reposition it in a gender neutral, design inspired, unintimidating environment, it's not beauty, it's self-care. And for us, that was a really important brand positioning, because our clients that see us are those that are so focused on investment in themselves, like their self-care routine. And they think about us, on a monthly basis, like they do the brands they engage with from a fitness perspective, like the vitamins, mental health, like whatever goes into people's self-care pie. So, I think we've got a, more of a younger generation that's focused and appreciates skincare as just part of a holistic self-care routine.
Would you say also, since you're trying to differentiate the facial or pull the facial out from the spa, that it also is maybe a time perspective difference, where when you think about a spa, it's like a whole day kind of thing, or experience that you do, a wonderful experience, but this is, quite different, right?
No, you're exactly right. In all our research, sort of post like that, the light bulb moment, Mike, in terms of, hey, is there a there? The three friction points of time, cost, and convenience were just so far ahead of anything else. So when we were designing Heyday and how we wanted to like have the menu, how we wanted to set up our service and the in-shop experience, everything came down to addressing those friction points, because we wanted to make Heyday a brand that was like really easy and frictionless to engage with.
After, I guess, the first year where you were at 100% and business was really kicking in, how did you think about as well, like, retail expansion? I know that part of also your mission with Heyday was, hey, we want this to be maybe more affordable, more open to other people. How did that translate as well into the locations you were choosing and picking in your maybe ideal customer profile as you thought about retail expansion?
I mean, retail expansion is one of those areas, Mike, where if you speak to different people, you couldn't get more diametrically opposed points of view on how should a brand ultimately expand. The way we thought about it at Heyday, and I think depending on like the brand or the category that different consumer businesses are in, that you can actually have very, very different approaches. So one could be, hey, we want to plant flags and have like one location in each city. But by nature of like Heyday and the fact that we're a service based and we're like sort of like a monthly service, there's real economies to clustering and sort of like density of locations. So, our number one strategic imperative when we started Heyday was like, let's open the first door, let's prove out product market fit, and then let's plant a flag and be the market leader in New York. So we said, we are going to own the New York market before we go anywhere else. So we ultimately had 5 locations in New York before we then sort of took that flag and planted it across in Los Angeles. We can talk about why we did that versus another market, but with New York, we're huge on data and insights, and I think it's one where I think in my experience over the years, we've all spent far too many hours sitting around the boardroom table arguing about what we think it is the customer wants. Like, get out there and do the research and ask them, and that's going to help prove out where you want to go, who your core segment is, and how you want to focus on that. And I think for us as a brand, at the time, we were very much sort of focused on, sort of like, aspirationally, like metropolitan, modern female customer in that sort of like 28 to 35-year-old demographic. And as it happens, we had a lot of clients that were actually coming up from Tribeca to see us in the Nomad location. So that seemed to be an easy door. So we made Tribeca our second location. And then looking at the map, we said, we've got to, need a door on the Upper East Side. We need a door on the Upper West Side. And then we came back and did one on Lafayette, just in between East 4th, and that felt like a really good representation, knowing we could then infill from there. So that was sort of like the New York strategy. And then we said, okay, we can keep building in New York, but while we're doing that, we're now going to plant a flag and target Los Angeles, because that's arguably, like I said, the second most strategic city in the US. And if you have a flag in both of those, then you're a national brand, and you've got permission to then infill across all other secondary and tertiary states.
Makes sense to target those two cities, New York and LA, primarily. Also, I'd imagine I know you were definitely differentiated, it seems, from the spa, but I would imagine that probably from a competitive set, it was maybe like the maybe two of the most competitive cities to maybe launch in. Talk to me a little bit about how you thought about competition and getting the actual word to actually express what Heyday was for consumers in those two markets.
Yeah, it's at the time in New York, I think, and we're actually still seeing this, in 2022, a lot of the spas, they're almost going bigger and bigger in size, and sort of like more expensive fixtures, amenities, fittings, things like that. So they're almost going for a higher price point, and still like very much targeting a female-centric, age 50 or above customer who's got time and money. So they're not actually necessarily coming down in terms of trying to attract, healthier, younger people in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. So we've almost been in a white space, I think, in terms of like who we've been targeting. And, interesting statistic in terms of, and it's been remarkably consistent actually since day one, we've got a little under 30% of clients that come to Heyday that have never had a facial before. And I think it's amazing to see the high percentage of those that then sort of opt into a monthly membership program and jump straight into a skincare routine. But where we're capturing, sort of the lion's share of our clients away from that would be those that historically go to a spa for a once a year indulgence, special occasion, something on vacation, but they just don't have the time to fit it into their busy lifestyle. So, I'm not going to say we're necessarily in competition, because the two can coexist. But I think in a day and age where we all feel like we're getting stretched a mile wide and an inch deep, to your earlier comment, like people, time and cost are two huge drivers here. And at Heyday, when you can come to somebody that's focused, exclusively on the skin, you can be in and out in 60 minutes and get a world-class facial, with this trade-off in price, but without the trade-off in quality. It makes it very hard, I think, for other higher price point spas to compete with us.
And I think it also makes sense, because it's almost like Heyday. I know this was the original premise, but doubling down almost on facials as opposed to offering a variety of other types of services that maybe spas would do. And as you alluded to, spas were doing, right? Like in terms of different types of features or different types of services that they could actually provide customers. And so the fact that you're actually doubling down that we only do facials, or that is our primary focus, that's also like a definitely a point of differentiation.
And it's funny how the world's changed because 15 years ago you won by being all things to all people. But I think, and what I love about the environment we're operating in today is the bar on like the bar that customers put on us to execute, and this is like any brand or business, but like the bar with which you've got to perform today is so incredibly high. And I mean, skincare is complicated. So for us, it's like for us to be that trusted skincare brand and know we can deliver on that level of service and quality, you've got to focus, you've got to specialize, and you do that by doing one thing and doing it well. So, for us, that was just sort of blinkers down and said we're going to focus on the skin, and that's what we stand for.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So obviously, retail COVID hits in 2020. I'd imagine that was a very intense. I mean, intense time for all of us. I'd imagine owning retail shops was a very, very intense period. Walk me through what was happening in March, and also how you were when Heyday shops were actually able to open. Also, if some were had to close down permanently, and just that entire experience of what happened in 2020 up until now.
The year that was a dog year in 2020. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I could imagine a worse category to be operating in. Performing facials when it came to COVID. I think, one of the most incredibly challenging months professionally of our lives, I think, without question. And when you're in a business that, we had to close. We closed all our doors, Mike, on Friday the 13th, rather ominously. And at the time, and I sort of look back and cringe with a bit of naivety, but at the time, I think we felt that would be closed for like 2 or 3 weeks. I don't think anyone at the time that week knew what was to come. As it turns out, we had our New York doors that could reopen end of September that year. But our Philadelphia and Los Angeles doors didn't open until like end of February and May of the following year, respectively. So, 14 to 16 months. So, it was challenging. And I think obviously with a lot of the government, sort of support that was getting provided ultimately to our team, it was also tough while that support was happening, it was tough to sort of get the labor back into the shops. But, when you're in a position as a founder who, we had probably a little under 450 employees leading up to that March 2020. And, my co-founder and I had a week where we had to let, sort of 425 team members go. It's a position as a founder you'd never imagine yourself being in. So it was, and obviously for, unforeseen, unforeseen reasons, but it was, I think, really challenging when you just didn't know the answers and there's sort of so many unknowns. So I think for us, it was just, there are two ways you could approach it. You could just sort of sit there and sort of throw your arms up and say, well, we don't know what's going to happen, so we're going to sit tight. I think when it became apparent that we were going to be closed for some time, we took a bit of a bare bones team and we, reinvented a bunch of our SOPs. We simplified a lot of what we were doing in the shops. There was almost a silver lining of we've got 5 years of like lessons learned here where we can adapt. We changed booking systems. So we actually rebased a lot of the foundation of the business in a way where it could be far more agile and elevated for when we did reopen. So, the team did some incredibly great work over that period. And I think where we also did a great job, where I'm incredibly proud, was I think sort of leading with communication, not just to external clients, but importantly to our team of estheticians. And we provided ongoing trainings on a weekly basis. We still did a lot of things to provide a community and openness. And I think we're incredibly transparent about what we knew, what we didn't know, hosting sort of open hours and things like that. So I think when everyone then feels like you're in it together, when it comes to then sort of like reopening and then the rallying of the teams to do that, a lot of kind of like let us get back into things, I'd say from a position of strength. But an incredibly tough period of time. And I think if you got me end of March of that year and said the Los Angeles doors aren't going to open until May of 2021, I wouldn't have believed you.
Yeah, I can only thanks so much for taking us through that about everything that happened March 2020. I can't imagine operating a few stores, getting really excited about the numbers and being able to expand, and then of course having to shut down all of them. Is this also I don't know if this was part of the original strategy, but was this also during these past couple of years when you also thought about creating a franchise model, or was that always kind of part of the plan?
Yeah, we'd made the strategic decision to franchise actually back in 2019.
Oh, okay.
And I think just part of the rationale behind that, Mike, is because we've got such a labor-centric business model. In any of our shops, we can have anywhere from 25 to 35 estheticians. You've got a shop manager, you've got some front desk hosts, you've got a shop attendant. I think because we've worked so incredibly hard to create this fantastic experience, and you want to wow somebody, whether it's their first time walking through a Heyday door or their 20th, you need partners that have got skin in the game and want to sort of protect and enhance and elevate that experience that we've worked so hard to create. So it's one where we felt that it was better for us to actually be able to sort of focus on the brand, the services, the products, like the innovation, and sort of like the technology where we can personalize skincare for our clients and live up to our mission, and let our franchise partners, who are fantastic operators, operate in a way that that we felt we probably couldn't do under a company operated model. And I think with a lot of the research that we did back in 2019, what's interesting is for those franchise concepts that work well, the franchise doors generally far outperform the company owned and operated doors across any metric. I mean, it's not just like higher top line revenue, it's like higher top line recurring revenue, higher client satisfaction, lower team turnover, like you name the metric. So it was one where we just felt like we could give our team members a better experience, we could give our clients a better experience, and we can accelerate the growth of door openings and the impact we can have, that I think makes our mission and our ability to help people with their skincare routines far more impactful, because we're just doing it at far more scale.
Why is that the case? That the franchises have actually been performing better than the corporate stores?
I mean, I think again, you see that across so many industries, and I think that there even be a few brands out there that people aren't even aware that the concept is franchised, which actually shows you how well they do it, right? The customer doesn't need to know what's a franchise door and what's a company owned and operated door. I think part of it is, it's expensive in retail to open a store, so partners are financially invested in that experience. They care. So I'd say they just not just they have an owner's mindset, like they are an owner, so they've got that mindset, and that generally sort of exceeds that of an employee.
What then do you think about when it comes to, because this is quite unique in that you have corporate stores, then you also have franchises, and I know that the franchises I think are growing at a much faster rate, I'd imagine, than the corporate stores. But how do you balance that in terms of where you should open maybe a new corporate shop, a corporate store versus a franchise or franchisee, and also where should those franchisees maybe be located that are actually optimal for Heyday to succeed?
We use our corporate stores as the guinea pig for innovation, testing and learning things, and it's great. And we have monthly meetings with all our franchise partners where we come and report back on, hey, here are the things that we've tested. Here's what's worked, here's what hasn't worked. And those initiatives that work, we then package them up to then be rolled out across the entire system. So that's generally how we use the franchise doors, Mike. And I think it's also it's great because you can empathize and relate with everything that our franchise partners are going through. And I think it also just puts us in a much better position as operators, and being on that side of the table to also help them like own, manage, grow, and navigate the problems that come with just having a team of 35 people and doing what we do. So I don't see us going beyond that, but it's just great to draw on own doors in three different cities, three different states as a way to, I think, help us ultimately be a better partner to our franchise partners.
And then and the franchisees, are they across the US? Like where are they opening their doors?
Yeah, great question. I mean, all across the US. I mean, I think we see a tremendous opportunity across the US, and time will tell what that number ultimately looks like. But I think you can look at some pretty big concepts like European Wax, like Massage Envy, that have got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of doors, and we feel that we can be that leader in skincare services. So, we spent a lot of time, Mike, doing some very detailed territory mapping across the top 51 MSAs across the country. So, we're out to find the best franchise partners in all those regions to work with them. So, we've got, next year as an example, 2023, we've got around 30 doors opening, and they're opening in, we've got DC, we've got Atlanta, we've got Boston, Austin, Houston, Dallas, Phoenix, San Francisco, Seattle, more in Los Angeles, Denver, Kentucky, Chicago. So it's the right cities and the right flag planning that we absolutely want to be doing. So really excited to, I think, use the next 12 to 24 months to really cement Heyday as the national brand.
Amazing. Amazing. How do you think, because I would imagine that one of the hard parts of managing a franchise business, especially one that's rapidly growing, is making sure that each retail shop has that same consistency that you would like to see, just as you're running it in a corporate realm. How do you think about the relationship between you and the franchisees and making sure that kind of consistency is there?
There are a number of checks and balances that I think help ensure that the shop is operating and adhering to the various brand standards from an aesthetic perspective. We're very comprehensive and rigorous on not just sort of initial training, Mike, but ongoing training. To my mind, like the biggest thing that we want to be mindful of as we expand is consistency of the experience. And we've got different color palettes and things where, I think you've got brands over the years like Sweetgreen and Warby Parker that have done such a fantastic job of, when you're in one of those doors, they're a little different, like every location, but it's distinctly a Warby Parker DNA or it's a Sweetgreen DNA, and we're doing that at Heyday. There are random, spontaneous sort of like checks we can do, obviously just to ensure that the franchise partner is executing per our standards. But I think one thing that we pride ourselves on with our data and the fact that all our facials are recorded, there's a lot of active sort of like Ask Nicely NPS scores that we get. So we can look at dashboards with all these stores like on a live basis, so we can really understand team and client satisfaction. So if there's any bumps in the road, we can also jump on those very, very quickly.
Cool. That's awesome. How also do you think about I'd imagine that this is maybe a more of a minor part to your business, and so I'd imagine that franchising and the retail stores are the main focus. But how also do you think about Heyday's e-commerce business and kind of marketplace for selling other products? How has that been in terms of a percentage of your overall business, and they kind of relate to one another?
We've got some exciting new things coming on our product strategy next year, but I think we're trying to be, for us to be the trusted brand in skincare, Mike, you've got to be seen as a place of brand discovery. So I think we're in the fortunate position where we're getting access to new brands and new products before others are seeing them, and how we get exclusives around that. So you'll generally see that they're represented on our shelves in our stores. We do have a more broader representation on our website. We've chosen to be more thoughtfully curated, where we're trying to get the right, sort of like handful of brands, where depending on a customer's like skin type, concern, or price point, we've got products that can address all those needs. But I think one thing, and this is an area where we're trying to come at it very differently from how the category is more broadly structured. We don't want thousands of SKUs. that doesn't win. It's very overwhelming for the customer. So many products, you just don't know what's right for you. So we're far more curated in that respect. You're right. It's a smaller part of the business, but it's also it's growing nicely. And as we're getting like more and more eyeballs on our website, obviously we're pretty excited for the scale and the speed with which we can actually grow our e-commerce business over the coming years.
If the e-commerce business is growing quite rapidly, and I know you're as you mentioned, you have some of these exclusives that you're able to get first access to new products, but do you have any ambition to also launch your own products as well on the skin and your own skincare line, since it already is a point of discovery?
No, absolutely. And the answer is yes. But I think where we've seen some other concepts almost go from one extreme, one end of the pendulum to the other on third-party brands to like entirely their own. I think what you'll see with some Heyday branded product that will, that's sort of in development as we speak, it's going to complement the third-party brand curation. So, I don't know over time like how from a SKU perspective, how big it will be, but I don't see it being beyond sort of like 10 or 15% of our overall product sales. I mean, there are some incredible R&D that's happening in skincare products. Obviously, when we're doing facials and with our estheticians, we've got a very unique insight into so many faces and issues and concerns and whatnot. So our products will play complementary and additive roles to some other great third-party brands. So I think we're really looking forward to being in a position to share some of that with the public in the not too distant future.
That's great. That's great to hear. But I mean, as you alluded to, it's also two very different businesses, right? Like you have to do heavy R&D in order to create products versus having retail shops and having to obviously manage all of these franchisees. So I also understand how, in terms of proportionately, it will only be probably a small portion of their overall graded pie, that it will never be totally all Heyday products maybe on your site, just because, of course, these are very restricted.
It's a great point. I mean, I think one thing that I think a lot of companies you can easily fall into the trap of is trying to be too many things to too many people, or you just bite off more than you can chew, sooner. So I think there's other big pockets and opportunities of growth within Heyday. We've spoken about them with the board. We know what they are. I think it's just a question of, is it 2023? Is it 2024? Like, when do we want to lean into these in a little more detail? But you're right. I mean, we've got 30 plus doors opening next year. We've got some great menu innovation coming our way. I think as a management team, we want to be focused more on, getting sort of 3 A's versus 6 C's on the report card.
Shifting back to the retail side of the business. I know that we're kind of in a maybe post-COVID, I want to say. I guess it really depends who you ask. Post kind of COVID environment. But from your sense, in terms of how your stores are doing, what is your pulse on the consumer in terms of being willing to go back into stores, and actually, have, facials done at Heyday? Are you seeing levels that were equal to, prior to the pandemic, in terms of number of customers you have? Or are you seeing that people have been away for so long that it's actually been incredible the amount of excitement people have to actually come back and use professional services?
I think we're fortunate, and to answer this probably like for Heyday and other brands, Mike, I think I'm still trying to understand where customers are willing to come for a physical experience, whether it's like at Heyday or anywhere else, and where are they sort of like then substituting that for anything they can do at home. And I think the benefit of what we do at Heyday, again, you've got estheticians, you've got professional products, like there's a number of reasons, to come to us. We've got machines, like there's things you just cannot do at home. So I think brands that can offer a reason to believe and a reason to come into a shop, a physical location, are going to continue to thrive. So we've got, so many of our clients that saw us pre-COVID that have come back. We've got so many new clients that have moved to moved to New York, moved to LA, that are seeing us again. Some of the differences we're seeing, I think, are more around time of day and day of week, just as people have got like more flexible, sort of like working habits.
Cool. Oh, I appreciate that. What is one book that's inspired you personally and one book that's inspired you professionally?
Personally, would be probably a book that I reread every year. Would actually be The Alchemist. I think professionally, it was actually a great book by an author called Eric Ries, called The Lean Startup. You read that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are two great ones. Really excited to add those to the book list. Adam, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it. And there you have it. It was such a pleasure chatting with Adam. I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. If you're enjoying the show, I highly recommend subscribing to my newsletter at theconsumervc.com, where you'll receive all new episodes straight to your inbox and a weekly recap of all the consumer deals happening. Thanks for listening.